Howdy y'all, welcome to another episode of Caveman Barbecue and Outdoors. My name is Zayd and today we're going to knock out the king of barbecue, a whole packer brisket. Alrighty y'all, we got ourselves a whole prime packer brisket here from Costco. I'm going to go ahead and get this guy out of the cryovac. I'm just going to open that right along the decal because that whole guy is going to come out anyway. Get this guy out of our cryovac. A lot of people wonder what a whole packer brisket is whenever we use that term. There's two primary muscles in a brisket. You have your point, which is going to be your fattier end, and then you have your flat, which is going to be the leaner end. Here in Texas, and I would say in large parts of the South, we find packers all the time. I know up on the East Coast and a lot of places that don't do whole briskets like we do, you may have a little bit of trouble finding them. I've typically found them in all Costco's or, honestly, even online. But we're going to go ahead and get this guy trimmed up, show you guys how to do that. That is probably the most important part of actually cooking the brisket is doing the trim, making sure it's nice and aerodynamic. As you can see, this is a bunch of fat right here on top and all these really nasty edges and this graying just from the air being in the cryovac. We got to get this guy cleaned up before we do anything else to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut this mohawk down a little bit. Do not waste any of this. This is good meat and good fat. That's why I have this plate right there. I'm going to go ahead and save that. That way I can put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. But first order of business, we're going to go ahead and get this decal cut out here. So I'm going to flip it my way. And you should really be able to feel where it starts. Now, what you're looking for is that really hard fat. It's not going to be like that soft surface fat or meat. The reason why we want to get that guy out of there is it does not render. No matter how long you cook this, no matter what you do to it, whether you put this guy in a crock pot, which is sacrilege on a brisket, or whether you smoke it for 36 hours, that decal is never, ever, ever going to render out, and it's going to make your final product not be as good. We are almost through. And what I'm doing here is I'm just using the tip of my knife. Your knife is going to be very important for this. So you want to make sure you have a nice sharp knife. Boning knives work best in my experience. Sometimes even like a little bit of a stiffer fillet knife I've seen has worked pretty well. So here's that decal I was telling you guys about, coming out right now. There you go. What I'm also going to do now that I'm on the back side of this is all of this stuff is also going to be really hard fat. On the back side, you want to go ahead and trim down as much fat as you can. The fat cap on the opposite end, the top side, is really the fat that you want to keep. Any of this stuff, you really don't want. It's just excess fat. Get this guy trimmed down to just the meat. Now you can leave a little bit of it, but you don't want, huge globs of fat on the back end. This is a very weirdly shaped brisket, but it looks perfect. The marbling in this thing, again, it is a prime brisket, but the marbling is pretty solid. So, and just like filleting a fish, any of this surface fat, I want to get knocked off. Now you can ultimately leave this if you'd like. I'm just going to take it off. Like I said, there's a lot of fat on the fat cap on this guy. So I'm just going to come through and clean up most of this, and anything else that's dangling like that, I want to go ahead and get trimmed off just because it's going to burn up in the fire, y'all. What separates a really good brisket from an average brisket or a terrible brisket, honestly, is going to be your trim work. If you go to a lot of these Texas barbecue joints, a lot of them are cooking with the same wood. A lot of them are using post oak. A lot of them are using a very basic rub. What really separates a great piece of brisket and a great final product from just an average one is going to be that trim work, how you take care of the piece of meat, and the preparation before you even put it on the smoker. And the quality of the cut that you get as well. A prime brisket is going to always be better than a select or a choice. Alrighty, y'all. Now we're gonna work on the top end here. Now this one has a pretty nasty score here. You're gonna see that occasionally in a scalp from the butcher. Again, not a huge deal, not the end of the world, but we're gonna try to avoid scalping the meat. Just a couple pieces of advice. What I tell people to do, and I know earlier I talked about having a sharp knife, really important when you do this. Another thing is leave your brisket as cold as possible. I left this guy in the fridge. I even put him in the freezer just for a little bit, just to make this fat hard. That's gonna help you when you go and you do your trim work. Now, what you're looking for ultimately is about a 1/4 inch of fat. Like right here, that's pretty good. But this is closer to 1 inch. We really wanna take this guy down. I'm gonna leave same thing on the point, right around a 1/4 inch. And once I get this fat cap where I want it to be, I'm also gonna trim the edges and make this a little bit more aerodynamic. That way, when we get it on the smoker, we have a nice, even, perfect cook on this guy. So we're gonna go ahead and start right here. And it's okay to take multiple swipes on this, you know, like if you don't want to cut into the meat too much. So don't be afraid to cut a little bit at a time, and really just take your time when doing this. Now, you know, this guy was a 15, almost a 16-pound packer brisket. I anticipate after I get this guy trimmed off, I'm probably only gonna have, I would say 12 to maybe 11 to 12 pounds of meat. Now, I'm not gonna waste, this is a whole bunch of fat and meat. I'm gonna end up separating this out. A lot of the fat, I'm actually gonna save for two things. Number one, beef tallow. It's like butter. It's actually even better than butter. And I'm gonna save a lot of that to put on the brisket back when I pull it off to rest. And also, if you like to fry things, and we live in the South, so we love to fry stuff, beef tallow is a great substitute, honestly much better for you than any vegetable or canola oil, and it honestly tastes so much better. There's also a couple good recipes for homemade flour tortillas that use beef tallow. So, save that. Throw it in a gallon Ziploc bag, save it for your next burger, grind your own meat, and then render down some of that tallow and make some good frying oil or whatever. And I was just talking about not scalping. Got a little bit of a scalp there. That's okay. It's going to happen. I'm not a professional. So we're going to try to avoid scalping the brisket any more than it is. Now, again, that's not the end of the world. This is on the point. So most of the intramuscular fat's going to be on this end right here. So we're A-okay there. And what we're looking for, like I said, is right about a 1/4 inch throughout the whole brisket. And then we're also looking to get a nice aerodynamic shape. And we'll help that out here once I get this trimming done. Right here, this is called the Mohawk. We're gonna cut this guy down a little bit more, and that'll actually show you guys how great this intramuscular fat is. It's fantastic. Alrighty, y'all, I said I was going to take every single piece of fat off on the back of this. I decided to leave it. It's completely optional. If you render your fat down good enough, a lot of this will actually render out. So we're going to go ahead and leave all this small stuff on here. Now, I usually don't use a binder if my brisket is wet on the surface. This guy's a little bit drier, so I'm taking a mixture of mustard and pickle juice just so I have something that my seasoning will adhere to. And what we're gonna do is just take a little bit. You don't have to go overkill. You just want a tiny bit. Now, for those of you that hate mustard, just know that this adds zero flavor. It's really just something for the seasoning to stick to. Now, you don't have to use mustard. You could use water. I know some people use olive oil. Some people use hot sauce. Actually, I'm a big fan of a hot sauce binder, like on some ribs. But mustard and pickle juice is the traditional way to go in Texas, or actually just mustard. Pickle juice was kind of a newer thing. But again, don't want to go overkill. Just want something on the surface. That way your seasoning can stick. And don't forget to do the sides. That way your seasoning stick to the side as well. So that's right where we want it. Huge brisket piece of advice. I don't like buying pre-made rubs. Now, there are some fantastic rubs for brisket out there. I'm not dog them at all. They're great. Here's the reason why I say that. A traditional Texas brisket is made with salt and pepper only. We're gonna add a little bit more to that, and I'll explain that here in a bit. But typically those rubs that I get, and I've always had trouble with this, those rubs that I get pre-made, you know, with all those fine particles, it does two things. One, it doesn't really allow smoke to penetrate into your meat, but most importantly, to me, a brisket is not a brisket without a solid bark, and what builds bark is gonna be coarse black pepper. You know, those finer seasonings really don't help, you know, actually not help at all. They hurt that black pepper, and they prevent it from sticking to the surface of the meat. So here's my salt mix. I'll explain what this is in just 1 second. But I'm taking some coarse ground black pepper. You know, 16 mesh should be great. And that's the first thing that's going on this piece of meat after I put a binder on. I'm gonna go black pepper first before I add any salt or any of my other seasonings. So if you use another pre-made rub, my advice is make sure you take some black pepper and you put that on first. And you wanna go coarse black pepper, and you wanna go heavy on your black pepper. Because without this much pepper, y'all, you're not gonna get a good bark on your brisket. And for those of you that don't like black pepper, don't worry. Once this hits heat, it's gonna really tame that flavor down. You're gonna get, I mean, even with this, you're barely gonna taste that black pepper. It's gonna really come down once you smoke it for, you know, 10, 12, 15 hours. It's gonna really bring the flavor down. This is a really good moment to hit your sides, by the way, because once I season my presentation side, which is my fat cap, I really don't want to have to, you know, move the meat in weird angles and knock any of that rub off on the presentation side. So pretty good time right now to go ahead and hit your sides. It's just like everything else. You want to always season the sides of your meat. Okay, 15 minutes later. We got our black pepper on here, no other seasonings right now. This may look like a lot of black pepper to some of y'all, but I promise you, this is gonna really help build that bark. And I mean, almost all of your flavor on this is gonna come from the bark. What we're gonna go ahead and do next is put on our salts. Now, I'm gonna break some hearts. This is not just salt. It's kind of a, I mean, what's the word for it? A very well-known secret that most of your barbecue places in Texas, I mean, your Texas Monthly Top 50, I'm talking the best barbecue places in Texas, which automatically make them some of the best barbecue places, not probably, for sure make them the best barbecue places in the world, don't use just salt and pepper on their briskets. Now, I'm not saying all of them do a little bit something extra, but most of most of the people on that list have kind of gotten away from the salt and pepper. Now, for those of you that are wondering why I'm making such a big deal about that, Texas brisket or Texas barbecue in general is very simple. It's typically post-oak fire, salt and pepper, that's it. So I did a perfect 50-50 mix of coarse salt and Lowry's. This gives it a awesome, like another level of flavor, and I highly recommend it. So again, some of the best barbecue places in the world that claim to use just salt and pepper, put Lowry's or put some garlic powder or something a little extra in their brisket rubs. This is a big piece of meat, so don't be afraid to get seasoning on it. You want to apply this as evenly as possible and as liberally as possible. Contrary to common belief, I know seasonings are in the barbecue world are called a rub. Please don't rub this in. You actually want to pat it. So I'm just going to kind of press this in. That way I make sure it's making solid contact. As you can see, you're going to lose some of that seasoning on your hand, but that's okay. And I'm gonna reapply just one more layer, and then I'm gonna flip it and make sure I get my sides. This is why I recommend doing your sides when you're seasoning your back end. That way your presentation side for the Instagram looks perfect and you have awesome bark. So always season your sides, but always season your sides on the back side of the brisket, not on your presentation side. We're gonna give this a quick flip. We're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing on this side. Thin layer of mustard. And for those of you wondering why I say presentation side, in any kind of cooking, you want your presentation side, of course, to look the prettiest. So you wanna make sure you have a good bark. In this case, for this being brisket, you wanna make sure you have a really good bark on your presentation side. Now, I cook my briskets, and if you ask me, there's only one way to cook a brisket on an offset smoker. That's gonna be fat side up. So whenever I go and put this guy on the smoker grate, I don't wanna have to turn it over again and lose some of that seasoning on the top. I really wanna be able to take it just like this, pick it up, and put it on the grate, just like this. I don't wanna have to flip it or any of that, so always season your presentation side, or the side that's going to be facing up, last. Now, the reason why I say fat side up on an offset smoker is an offset smoker is gonna work very similar to an oven. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of convection. Your oxygen is gonna be sucked in through your firebox and go out your smokestack. So a lot of that heat is gonna come over the top of the brisket. Your fat cap acts like a barrier and as a layer of protection to protect the meat underneath it from the heat. And you're also gonna get your best fat rendered that way. Now, if you're cooking on a Traeger pellet grill or any pellet grill, or like a Big Green Egg, or even like a Weber kettle, a lot of your heat, or most of your heat's gonna come on the bottom, because that's where your fire pot is and that's where all your coals are. In that case, you wanna flip this guy and you wanna go fat side down. That way you have that fat protecting the meat underneath it. But in our case, we're going traditional, going on a stick burning offset, we're going fat side up. Therefore, it is our presentation side. Now you can do garlic powder or onion powder. I know a few places do that here. I just really like the coarse sea salt and Lowry's. That way I don't feel like I'm breaking too many rules, and I can still technically at that point get away with saying I'm just using salt and pepper. And not to rag on them, because I do think they make the best barbecue in the state of Texas, and like I said, therefore in the world. Our Texas Monthly #1 place, Goldie's Barbecue and Franklin's Barbecue, which a lot of the guys, fun fact, at Goldie's used to work at Franklin's. They do an almost identical thing. They use Lowry seasoned salt, and they use black pepper and just regular kosher salt in their rubs. And I think on all their meat, they season almost identically the same way. Is that 50-50 kosher salt and Lowry's with black pepper. Now I could be wrong, but last I checked and last I heard, that's what they're doing. But I don't work there, so I ultimately can't tell you if that's a fact or not. Now that being said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with a salt and pepper brisket. They're still fantastic. Most of your flavor is gonna come from the wood anyway, and of course your meat. But if you want just that little something extra, not a bad idea to throw some of that Lowry's on. There we go. Got this guy good to go. I'm not gonna rub or pat the top side in. I'm just gonna let this sit. The salt's gonna naturally draw a little bit of moisture out. So while I get my fire ready, this is gonna really help the seasoning adhere just by drawing some of that moisture out. So we're gonna take this on outside after I wash my hands, of course. We're gonna get this offset rolling and we'll be right back with y'all. Alrighty, y'all. For those of you wondering why I put some beef fat on top of this, that from the trimmed brisket, just like oil, this is gonna really help accelerate the fire. I actually have a few more pieces on my plate right here. That way when I start putting my logs on, I can really get that fire burning fast and hot. That way I can speed up the process of building a clean fire, making sure everything's combusted and burning properly. So we're gonna let these coals get hot. Don't be afraid to use some lump charcoal on this. No, don't use briquettes, but don't be afraid to use some lump charcoal. I mean, essentially, once you burn these guys down, it turns into that anyway. But you're gonna find yourself really wanting a coal bed, you know, super late into the cook, whenever, you know, things are slowing down a little bit. You really want that coal bed to remain large and as solid as possible. That way you're really able to throw logs right on top of it and have them catch immediately. I mean, having a coal bed is a really important part, if not the most important part behind airflow of having a clean burning fire. So we're gonna let these coals catch about 90% of the way. Once they're lit, throw a log on there, and I'm gonna throw that brisket right on top of it and throw on another piece of tallow. So we're gonna let this get caught and we'll be right back with you. I don't want them to know I do this. I'm trying to start a fire for a real man. And I have to use my wife's hairdryer because it kept on going out on me. Now there's a science to how you put a brisket on a fire. What I want to do is put the point towards the firebox and make sure the flat is next to my smokestack. So what I want to go ahead and do here is very carefully take this guy, put it just like that. So again, point towards the firebox. We got the old country running right around 225 degrees. Now, there's a science to a fire. Most of the smoky flavor on your brisket's gonna be made or absorbed in the first 4 hours of the cook. So, contrary to what everyone says, and I'm not saying a clean fire is not important. Clean fire is very important. You don't want an acrid, bitter tasting brisket. It is okay to burn a little bit of a dirtier fire. A lower temperature, you know, that 225 to 235 range fire for the first couple hours of the cook. That way your brisket, you know, really sops up like almost like a sponge for that smokiness. You know, I've run briskets like a 250 to 275 really clean fire, and it doesn't really have that smoky flavor that you expect to have when you eat barbecue. So first couple hours, I'm gonna run this a little bit lower. Not as clean as a fire, and as you can see, I mean, it's still relatively blue, but you're able to actually see a little bit of white smoke. I'm gonna run it like this for the first couple hours just to make sure I get some good smoke on this thing, and then I'm gonna transition to a really clean burning fire. It is also really important that you leave this lid shut for the first couple hours of the cook to make sure there's no crazy fluctuations in temperatures. So leave the lid shut. It's okay not to be burning a super clean fire for the first couple hours. And you know, after a couple hours, we'll be right back to check on this thing. Probably throw on a couple of logs, open my vents, and get this guy breathing where we want it to be. But yep, we're gonna go lid down here for a bit, and we'll take it from there. It's been about 4.5 hours, and I haven't really even took a real peek on this. I did put a water pan. Ooh, smoky. I did put a water pan over here just to get some more moisture in the cook chamber. What I'm gonna go ahead and do now is, I mean, as you can see, that bark, I'll get some flashlight on this. Bark is starting to set really damn good on this thing. So, you know, this is about the time that if you wanna spritz, wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and spritz. Like, this is the corner right here, and as you can see, I couldn't find a bottle, so I'm using one of these like little mister thingies, but hey, it does the trick. And you can do really whatever you want for a spritz. Some people do apple juice, some people do like hot sauce and apple cider vinegar. I'm just going straight water, and what I'm gonna do is just like these corners that are a little on the drier end, you know, I'm just gonna hit this guy up right here and this back corner, because those are those ends are going to get a little dry. Now I want to avoid spraying the fat cap, let that continue to render down as much as possible, but any of those ends or edges that were looking a little bit crispy, we just want to go ahead and spritz a little bit of water. You know, I reckon we probably need another couple hours on this guy like this, probably another 5 to 6 hours total. But here in a couple hours, what I'll do is, you know, I'll check on it. And of course, I'm going to come back every 30 to 45 minutes, just take a peek, spritz what needs to be spritzed. But in a couple hours, I'm probably going to go ahead and get this guy wrapped up, as long as my bark is set the way that I want. You know, everyone, let me go ahead and get this closed up, but everyone always asks me, like, hey, how long does it take to cook a brisket? And or what temperature do I need to be looking for? I mean, when it comes to brisket or really any barbecue, you're not looking for time, you're not looking for temperatures. The only temperature that you need to be concerned with is the temperature of your pit. When it comes to your meat, especially a brisket, what I'm looking for before I wrap, before I pull anything off, I really want to make sure my bark is set and, you know, have the color that I want on there. And as soon as that's where we need it to be, we're going to go ahead and wrap the guy up. Now, you can use butcher paper. I'm going to foil both this guy here tonight. But yeah, you really want to make sure your bark is set. You want to make sure everything looks good. And then at the same time, it's also a fine line. You want to make sure you're not developing, you know, going beyond the bark and burning it. And those ends, you know, you don't want to turn them into beef jerky. So, you know, right around 6 hours, you want to go ahead and get the guy wrapped up, either butcher paper, foil boat, whatever you got to do. But yep, we're gonna give it another couple hours and we'll be right back. Yes. Alrighty, y'all, good morning. As you can see, the sun is now up. Woke up about every 45 minutes to an hour just to feed the smoker some new logs. I did start the brisket a little bit later than I wanted to, which is why it took me all night to do. But let me show you guys what we're working with right now. So as you can see, we developed a beautiful bark on this thing. It's probing pretty probe tender. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna pull this off the smoker right now, and I'm gonna let it rest in some foil and that tallow that I was making earlier. I was going to do a foil boat on this brisket, but I figured we were just gonna go Goldie style and just go completely naked. So we're gonna go ahead and get this guy pulled off, wrapped up, and I'm gonna show you what to do next. Alrighty, y'all, finally got this brisket pulled off the smoker here. Excuse the mess around me. It's my son's first birthday, and you know, we've been up all night, not only cooking this guy, but getting the house ready. Well, not really ready, but getting decorations up and cooking for the company we're gonna have. But we're gonna go ahead and get this guy prepped to rest. This is my tallow. Now, I'm supposed to, you know, before I let this cool, strain all these big chunks out. Not a huge deal right now. I'm gonna reheat this anyway to reuse it. Once I reheat it, I'm gonna go through with a strainer and get all the stuff out. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a couple big globs of this right now. I'm gonna put it right down in the middle of my foil. Like so. And then what I'm gonna do is just take this brisket, put it right in the middle of the foil. I'm gonna put a little bit more tallow right on top of the brisket. Now, completely optional, but I promise you guys, if you do tallow on a brisket and give it a nice long rest, it's gonna come out so moist and so tender, it's gonna be fantastic. A couple different ways you can hold briskets. You could put them in a cooler, hold them that way for hours, or you can put them in the oven. So I have people come in this late afternoon, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and set my oven to 150 degrees and just leave it there. Probably I would say about an hour before they show up. I'll turn it off and put it on the counter just to make sure it cools down a little bit more. But we're gonna go ahead and get this thing wrapped up here. It's gonna go right back on the sheet pan. You want to make sure it is as airtight as possible. You want to trap that steam in here just to let the brisket finish cooking. Not that it's not done cooking, but you want to trap that moisture in. That way it gets nice and tender for you. We're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and set this guy in the oven. We'll see you guys when we slice into it. As you can see, it's birthday time. There's a bunch of stuff hanging from the ceilings and from the walls everywhere, and there's a birthday boy right there. He gets a birthday brisket. So we pulled this guy off right around, I don't know, like 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. And I threw it in the oven, like at 150 degrees, just for a couple hours. Then I shut it off, just to make sure the rest is good on it. But it is butter soft when I probed it. What we're gonna do is just pick him up, put him on this cutting board here, and hopefully not make a mess, because a lot of people put a lot of effort into cleaning this place. So again, it's a party, also ignore the people in the background, but as you can see, bark looks fantastic on this guy. I mean, it was a pretty long smoke on it, but we're gonna go ahead and get this guy cut up here, show you the difference between the point and the flat, and hopefully we did a pretty good job. But this is right here, the telltale sign usually of how we did. And as you can see, I mean, that's just as tender as could be, and we got a really good smoke ring on there. And the fat, turned yellow. That's a really good sign that we got a solid render. This should be like candy. Even though this is gonna be a really lean piece compared to the point, I mean, this is gonna be your indicator of how you did. And as you can see, I mean, it doesn't hold up under pressure at all. So, y'all, I would put that up against any of the Texas Monthly Top 50 places, not to exaggerate. This may be my better brisket. No, probably my best brisket to date. So we're gonna go ahead and slice this guy up here, just to show you. There's your, I mean, it doesn't hold up under its own weight at all. That's perfect. So we're gonna do 1/4 inch thick slices. You gonna try it? Get in there. Do that piece. I know you don't like fat. Louie, try. We're gonna come get a piece.
Oh wow.
There's a brisket.
Oh. Oh, I was like, what is that? Oh, okay.
Wow.
What do you make?
Because you got the end. That's gonna be a salty piece.
Yeah.
That's why I like it. I like it salty. Really good.
But you guys got the salt here, and as you go, it's gonna be less salty.
I love it.
That's all the crisp.
You see him?
No. No.
There?
No. That's my piece.
It's his brisket. That's how we did it. Alrighty, y'all. Got this semi-plated here. Got some more chopping and cutting to do. Got to make some sliders for some folks. But, I mean, if you like what you saw today, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment for us if you want to see anything in particular. And, yeah, appreciate you being along for the ride.